Hello, David. It's nice to see you again. How are things on your side of the pond?
Brenda, things are great, thank you. Even the sun is shining here in central London. You can maybe just see from the skylight over the top of my head. So things are good. Even the weather is looking up. Is everything good with you in the DC metro area?
Little cold, but otherwise no complaints. Yes.
Okay.
So I'm really happy that we're able to come together to continue our conversation in this second of our three-part series around challenges facing businesses and how they relate to global mobility coming into the new year. And last time we talked about top business risks. And so today, I'd love to hear your thoughts since that conversation around what we should be thinking about in terms of top investment opportunities. Where do you think that businesses should be focusing both economic and non-economic resources?
Sure. Now, I've been thinking about that since our last conversation, Brenda, about a month ago, which I really enjoyed. And we started, as I recall, in that conversation to think a little bit about what the business opportunities were. And you're right to say that they are being driven, I think, by where business leaders are thinking of making their investment bets, if you like, over the coming few years. So what I did do was, in effect, consult what the business leaders are thinking, and then we'll go on to see how that applies to GM leaders and managers. And you might remember last time I did draw on a PwC survey last year of global CEOs, what they said were their priorities in terms of threats and opportunities for the coming year. And they came out with a top list, which I thought was really interesting for us in the GM space. Let me just pick up a few of those things. They said their priority areas for investment in the coming couple of years included leadership and talent development, digital transformation, organic growth, surprise, surprise, they want to grow their businesses, and research and development and product innovation. So those priority investment areas, I guess, are the kind of flip side of the risks that we talked about last time. You mentioned economic and non-economic areas for investment. Well, they talk there about technology, but they talk about investment in talent, which is our key focus, I guess, in these conversations. So that's what business leaders are bothered about. And I think the challenge for us in the GM space is, what do we think that means for GM in terms of the opportunities for us in our business? So that's how I see the business dimension to this discussion.
So no surprise that we're in alignment, because the two things that are top of mind for me are around technology and the people piece, talent development. We are in an employees market, if you will, when it comes to, we talked about the reshuffle last time, when it comes to opportunities, both internally, I think, and also looking for potential opportunities externally. So when we think in terms of global mobility, we also touched on this last time, the opportunity for mobility managers to play a more strategic role and to really help organizations, help employers take a more holistic view of how to move people, where people should be, who can work remotely, what assignments should look like, and things like that. So I think this is a great time to invest in identifying opportunities to explore some of those things at a deeper level. In the coaching and learning and development space, we use a model around adaptive leadership, and it really is it involves really thinking about the challenge or the issue as an experiment. So this is a great time, with all of the movement and all of the changes we're experiencing, I think, for global mobility, to take some risks and experiment with some different things. But that's going to require the support of stakeholders and leadership. I think there are huge opportunities to utilize technology to help with that. There are all kinds of new applications of AI and things that we haven't really thought of before in terms of approaching strategic planning and things like that. So I think it's a new day for global mobility.
Brenda, no surprise. I do agree with that. I think it is a new day. And we talked, I think, last time about seeing GM through a positive lens
Yes.
and looking at a glass half full. And I think the glass, to be honest, is more than half full. And I think that's backed up by conversations I've had over the last month or so, which I might have mentioned to you in the past, with a number of GM leaders around the world. And I'll perhaps come back to that in just a few minutes. But I want to pick up, if I may, on a couple of the things that you said there that really rang bells with me. You talked about a holistic approach, and you talked about adaptive leadership. It's interesting to spend just one more minute on what business leaders say they're bothered about in terms of what they can contribute to society. And that might sound like a high-flown statement, but that matters to businesses these days because it matters to the business leaders and it matters to their employees. The people who are going to work for these organizations or stay with these organizations are concerned about what their employers are putting into society. So can I give you one more quote from that PwC survey? And they said, this is CEOs, when asked to prioritize the societal outcomes that businesses should help deliver, CEOs put the creation of a skilled, educated, and adaptable workforce at the top of the list. Skilled, educated, and adaptable workforce. Mm-hmm. Now, that is an important statement on behalf of business leaders that I think GM leaders can play into, and that they can help to create that flexible, educated, and adaptable workforce.
Yeah.
And they can do that by a bunch of the investments that you were talking about, I think, just a moment or two ago.
I think that everyone has to be willing to be more nimble. Okay. We are so accustomed to being guided by issues associated with compliance and this linear process, even to the point of, the time in which it's time or it's appropriate for a person to perhaps have an international assignment experience, going way, way back. But I think that all cards are on the table now. And so we really need to think of things, as you said, or be willing to look at them through a different lens. And that adaptability is key. I think where mobility managers can play a key role is really informing those decisions instead of being brought in on the back end of them, because they see so much. They see so much, and they have a much broader perspective than any one division leader might have, with all due respect. And so they really can play a significant role, I think, in helping to guide or influence some of the decisions about where people will work, how they will work, what contributions are possible, how their work can be enabled through technology and things of that nature.
I think that's absolutely right, Brenda. And if I can share with you and our audience, if I may, the key points from some conversations I've had recently, as I said a moment ago, with GM leaders and HR leaders in big corporations, I think around the world, from US, UK, continental Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia Pac. I think over the last month, I've spoken to people from all those parts of the world. And they were telling me that, to your point just now, they are actually actively, their input is being sought on a number of those big questions. Yeah. And gosh, we've talked about getting a seat at the table or getting to the steering wheel of the car and stuff like that. Well, maybe our colleagues are not steering the car, but I think they're being invited to the front seat, if I can use that metaphor, and being invited to help guide the CEOs, the chairs, the men and women on the boards of these companies of the direction that those companies are going to take. And just to give one area, and I've got a bunch if we get time to talk about them, one area that they're being asked to input to is the future of work, the famous hybrid model that we talked about last time. And I know our friends in Worldwide ERC reported a survey over the weekend that said 63% of US workers want a flexible hybrid work week, and the desire to go hybrid is particularly strong amongst 25 to 34-year-olds. Okay. So if that's what business leaders are looking at, a workforce that wants to work in a hybrid and flexible manner, can GM input to that? Yes, they can, or yes, we can, because we've got experience across countries, across geographies, across different age groups of being able to provide work for people in a flexible way. So if they want to operate based out of their holiday home or move to a different location on a temporary basis, GM people are the people that the business leader should turn to. So GM can contribute to something that is a big business thrust at the moment.
That's so true. And I think in terms of positions that historically have been thought of as something that you couldn't do remotely, certain people had to be in place in a particular location or region and things like that. And what technology enables is the ability to look at that, create a different model for some of those functions in particular. A lot of times that commands a significant investment, in solutions architecture and things like that at an enterprise level, which some organizations may be reticent to take. But I think that the return on those kinds of investments right now could be substantial. I think that that could speak to this great reshuffle that we talked about and things like that. And it really will help to just rethink and reframe what some of the opportunities look like. And I would venture to guess create new opportunities. But you can't do that in a vacuum, which is why I think that this is a great opportunity, more so than any I can think of in recent past, for global mobility managers to get involved in a meaningful way.
I think that's right, because again, globally, business leaders are talking about building this talent pool, and you can only do that effectively at the moment if you can draw flexibly on all the potential people who will fill that pool, and they want to be in different places around the world. They want to be coming in and out of the workforce. Technology is a great enabler there, and technology also matters, I think, within the global mobility space. Some of the aspects of the GM function that have been in the past seen as backroom, if you like, technological matters like tracking, compliance, tax, they can seem to be dry subjects that only matter to, say, the people in the backroom. I have been more and more convinced over the last year or so that those technological enablers, those IT systems, tracking systems, flexible compliance systems, are part of the key to constructing and keeping operating this flexible global workforce. So a tremendous spot for technology, for management of data, but it's got to be different from what it was in the past. You can't go to your bookshelf behind me or behind you and pick off the compliance rules for tax in Estonia, 1992. Right. It isn't like that anymore. Some people might want to go to Estonia or even the Ukraine at the moment, but how do you enable that flexibly and still meet government and regulatory requirements?
Well, the other thing is, the variances, the differentiators, one location to another. So perhaps a person spends a quarter in the UK and they spend a quarter in Southeast Asia, and they have family in Eastern Europe that they want to spend, all these kinds of things. What constitutes a home base, right? A location, and how does that impact David's compensation and social benefits and things like that? There's so many questions, but I think now is the time to peel back the onion on those things, because I don't see them going away anytime soon. And when you reference the statistics, the research report, I should say, that you just mentioned from Worldwide ERC, and you look at that age cohort, 24 to 35, that's the future. So that is going to be the core moving forward for the next 20 plus years, right? And so they're sending signals now about what the expectation is, what the requirements will be, and we need to begin to, we can't turn a deaf ear to that. I think that we need to be responsive, as you said, and really dig more deeply, probe, to understand more about what that will look like in the future of work.
I think that's right. And I think what strikes me about what you just said and what we covered in our earlier conversation is that the topics we're talking about now are not new topics, like development, management, succession, building a healthy workforce in the organization for the future. But in the past, when I started out in my career many years ago now, we would do things like detailed succession planning, but that would be rather tied to individuals. Individual X or Y might be the country manager in Vietnam in 10 years' time. So let's give him, often it was him in those days, let's give him or her the experience to get that. What I think we're looking at now, and talking to my GM colleagues, is the creation of a talent pool, which could be flexible enough so that one of that pool can be the country manager in a certain location in a few years' time. And that talent pool also has to allow for the fact that people might leave your own company and go somewhere else and then come back and rejoin. And that starts to get us onto something, again, that we've talked in the past that I know is particularly important from where you sit. It's the employee value proposition.
Yeah.
What are businesses, international businesses, offering to their international current and potential employees that will make them want to stay with the company or maybe rejoin the company at a future date? EVP is such an important thing now.
It really is. And we've got to get away from this mindset of just, shutting a person off or cutting them out if they decide to move on to another employer. That's a season, right? I think of Reid Hoffman's work around tours of duty and thinking, more in terms of contractual and project-based assignments as opposed to these long open-ended commitments, right? We don't use terms like loyalty, right, anymore when we think of employer-employee relationships over the long term. But you do need that psychological contract. You need to understand, with full transparency, what the exchange is and what the expectations are. I think that those are conversations that people have been reticent to have. But I think that in order to take that more holistic view and to really explore the opportunities fully, they have to be willing to have those conversations.
I think that's right. And I've always liked the term psychological contract. It's always existed in the organizations I've worked for, or that tended in my career to be a pretty small number of organizations. Things have changed now for the generations that have followed me. So I think it should be a challenge that could be taken up with the help of GM to establish a new psychological contract for organizations. Any organization that aspires to be a global organization needs to offer I think quite explicit psychological contract. This is what we will give you. These are the opportunities we will give you. We recognize, Brenda, David, that you might take a career change at some stage. In fact, you might almost go as far as say we would almost encourage that then maybe you return to us with some added experience that we will welcome with open arms.
Well, when you think of one of the greatest challenges, if we go way, way back and think about conventional long-term assignments, and one of the biggest challenges has always been reintegration or not so much repatriation, but reintegration. So yes. you gain all of this wonderful experience as an expatriate on an international assignment, and you come back, and there's nothing really to come back to that helps you to apply and further develop the experience that you got. And so maybe after that tour of duty or that assignment, it's time to rotate, and that's an external rotation, and it doesn't mean that you can't come back into the system. And those are the kinds of conversations I think we have to be willing to have now.
I think that's right, but in fact, I think that is probably facilitated by the current environment, the great reshuffle that you referred to a short while ago. Because thinking back, someone might go from the company I was with to run the operation in India for a few years, and then when she came back, had we got a door open for that person? Not so sure. But that was an environment where, on the whole, things back at the ranch, in this case London, were quite stable, and you could look around the office and you'd see the same faces. I think what's happening now is that the situation back at the ranch, whether that's London, Washington, wherever, is not that stable because this reshuffling is going on. So the person coming back from India could be coming back alongside someone who's been newly recruited from another company or something. So the fluidity that is now in the workforce, and there's loads of evidence for that, actually, in a way, I think, supports global mobility movement, because you've got people moving around on the mobility front. Heck, we've got people moving around in the domestic labor market as well. So,
I agree with you. the difference for me is that companies have got to be willing to hold a space for that and not see it as something adverse or negative or in any way derogatory. And I think that's where the shift comes into play. We still play the same games. I know I'm interviewing. I know I'm looking at something else. I know I'm being courted by another employer, and I wait until everything's buttoned up, and then all of that I think could change. I think there's an opportunity to revisit all of that, and we've got to be willing not to look at it negatively as employers, but to open up those conversations so that no one is caught at a disadvantage or off guard. And you can only do that, when you have those conversations in a more timely and meaningful way, I think. So
No, I think that's right. But how can, and this, I think we're starting now to touch on what will be our next conversation,
yes,
where which is fine, where we're going to focus, I think, much more, aren't we, on the practical actions that GM leaders and managers can take
right,
in 2022, is I think what we said.
yeah.
But one of those things could well be having a set of principles, if you like, a set of guidelines and values, and I make no apologies for using that word, that will guide employment and placing decisions. And that could be an explicit statement about being genuinely open to welcoming people back from a tour of duty or welcoming new blood into the organization. Of course, the trick is moving from that set of principles to actual actions. Okay, but that's a challenge in any business or in life. If you have a set of values and principles to guide you, that's great. But you must then act in line with those principles. And we're not even going to get into what politicians might or might not do here.
No.
Let's stick to business.
Yeah.
And if we have those sets of principles and those values driven approaches and act in line with those, then maybe that's a practical template for the years to come.
Yeah. But when I was offering that, it was in the guise of what you touched on earlier as an investment opportunity in research and development and the data, just gathering the data, perhaps looking at data points that we haven't considered before and then acting on them. We're really good about, accumulating all of this rich and wonderful information, and then what do we do with it, right? And so really beginning to pilot some of these new ideas to see what's there and what the relevance is or potential may be.
You're right, and I think that's one of the challenges and opportunities with GM to think about things like that, which as a GM leader many years ago would not, to be honest, have been on my radar. And it's a bit like the compliance thing; it would have been a back office thing. But if you kind of embrace that, and you can then take that to your boss, to the HR leader, or even to the chair of the board, and say, well, boss, if we can use these technological aids to manage the workforce and develop our EVP, wouldn't that be a good thing? And I think he or she would, I hope, say, well, yes, David, that's right. So will I support your investment in this technology as GM leader? Yes, I will, in order to achieve those business benefits. And that's the classic equation that you and I have talked about many times, is convincing the boss or bosses that he or she will see a return on the investment that they're willing to make in our function that we're talking about.
So, I'm listening to this exchange, and I'm envisioning, global mobility managers and human resource leadership donning these capes, right, to save the day and all of this. I think that organizations need to be willing or consider investing in new types of development for global mobility managers. So we talked about compliance and understanding, what all of that needs to look like, but really investing in the development of competencies around how to use artificial intelligence, around more digital applications and data analysis and things like that. That's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, if you will. But I think that for mobility managers who really are driven by the strategy and really want to have a more meaningful voice in decisions and have a seat at the table, these are the kinds of things, these are the kinds of skills and competencies that will need to be incorporated and folded in to their portfolios, to their CVs, in order to
Sure.
be able to have these conversations at a meaningful level and to add value.
Do you know, I think that's absolutely right. And I think you used the phrase a few minutes ago, and it's one that will ring a bell with you. It's adaptive leadership. And I would also add the word maybe innovative to that, because in order to be an adaptable leader these days, you've got to be innovative and to draw on the kind of things we've been talking about. And that can be part of your portfolio of skills as a leader, can't it? Whether you're in GM, HR, or, to be honest, any function. So I think adaptive leadership is going to be key to success in the coming years.
Yeah. And, a nod, obviously, to the folks at Harvard, particularly Ronald Heifetz, who developed the foundation for the adaptive leadership model. But, it's about making a distinction between technical problems, things that we recognize that we have a solution to, an accessible solution to, we know how to address it, and adaptive problems, things we've never seen before. And that's where the innovation comes in, because we really have got to zoom out and enlist different resources, have different conversations to get to a meaningful solution. And so I think it's time. I don't know that I hate to generalize and speak, to any one group, so definitively, but I don't know that global mobility managers have really had the opportunity, I'll say, to take that approach to things. And I think now is the time.
I agree with you. Now is the time, which I think is rather neat, because that leads us back to, there are these opportunities out there. We've talked about the threats. We've talked in this conversation about the opportunities. And I think we're going to move on, aren't we, to putting those opportunities into practice. What practical things can colleagues in the GM space do in the next year or two? That's going to be the prize that lies ahead of us, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was about to say, I wish I could roll the clock back 20 years or so, but I'll take that back. I'll say no, pass on that. But I do think for that group coming up, that 25 to 35 and on up, I think that there are huge opportunities to turn the page and really chart a new course with regard to how global mobility and talent management all come together in the interest of achieving the organization's purpose.
Absolutely, and of providing opportunities that employees, current and potential, will want themselves. So we're at a happy point, I think, where business drivers and people drivers, what motivates people, are coming together, I think.
Right. Yeah. We hope. Great conversation, David. Thank you so much. I can't wait to get to part 3.
Sure. It was lovely talking to you as always, and really looking forward to our next conversation, I think in about a month's time.
Yes. Thank you.
Goodbye for now, Brenda. Thank you. See you soon.